On KOKO, we welcome to the program Renee Hoganson. By the way, this portion of our program paid for by Renee Hoganson, a Democratic candidate for Congress in Missouri's 4th District. Hello, Renee.
Hello, Woody. How are you?
I am fine today, and how are you?
I am wonderful.
Are you ready to get down to the real campaign now?
Yes, I've been ready for that for a while, actually.
You've been doing this a while, I know.
Yes, I've been running for about a year and a half. I'm glad to put the primary election behind me and just focus on getting to November 6th and hopefully becoming our next Congresswoman to represent Missouri's 4th.
Well, what's the basic difference right now between this may be a tough question for you, for the Republican and Democratic parties? What's the big difference now?
Well, in my opinion, from my perspective, the GOP tends to be focused on the rich getting richer, the elite 1%. And I think they perpetuate an argument I think they perpetuate the whole right, left, red, blue ideology debate so that they can basically help the businesses grow richer and the middle class, of course, is shrinking and becoming poorer, and they don't seem terribly interested in helping average Americans.
I read something yesterday, you may have read it too, where the middle class right now, I forget, I think it's 40% of the so-called middle class people have trouble making it every month.
Yes.
Did you read that yesterday?
I did not, but I know that statistic, and I believe that that's true. I mean, in Missouri's 4th, here in our own district, as an example, 30% of our families are food insecure, and what that means is that 30% of our people don't know if they're going to eat again or when they're going to eat again. I mean, that's a horrible reality for any one person, let alone 30% of the people. And that 30%, by the way, is comprised of 51,000 children. And, to me, it seems that our government should be focused on helping the American people. And if it's going to put its finger on the scale for anyone, it should be for working families.
Yeah, well,
there's a bill that came out last week in the Senate, actually, an anti-corruption bill. And if that bill makes its way to the House and I get to go to Congress, I will certainly be about helping to pass an anti-corruption bill in this government, because Washington is full of corruption. It's full of the wrong focus, and it's full of people basically just working to empower their friends and enrich their friends and not really pass any legislation that's good for people. One thing I want to talk about while we're on the subject of wages and money. I'm sorry?
No, go ahead. I was just interested in what you're going to say here.
Yes. One of the things that I wanted to talk about the election on August 7th was right to work. Now, Missourians voted down right to work by 67%. But what I don't think people realize is that while that campaign was going on, and that campaign was comprised of thousands of people and millions of dollars basically educating people on what right to work is and why it's bad for all Missourians' wages, union and non-union alike. Well, what people don't realize is that our sitting Congresswoman co-sponsored national right-to-work legislation. So while we have spent all this time and money in order to effectively protect Missourians' wages, she has basically said that she wants to take that decision out of the hands of states, out of the hands of workers, and basically create a national right to work. So there would be no more fighting about it. We would simply be getting lower wages. So it's, I think that our current representative has forgotten who elected her and who is living in her district and what she is hired to do, quite frankly.
Do you think we should have a little higher minimum wage than where it is now? I'm not even sure what the number is right now.
It's $7, and I believe $7.85 if memory serves.
Okay.
Which, of course, is not a living wage. I mean, when you do the math on it, 40 hours at minimum wage is $16,500 gross. Now, if you want to work 60 hours at minimum wage, you're talking about $25,000 a year gross, which, statistically puts you just above the poverty line. But I would submit that's quite a bit of poverty if you're just making $25,000 gross.
What do you think it should be?
Well, there's a lot of talk about a $15 minimum wage. I personally think that in some of the urban areas where the economy is different than it is in rural areas, I think that is probably something that is needed. I think when you look at the economy in rural America, it's typically about 25% more depressed, if you will, on all fronts: wages, cost of living, just all the way around. And the translation of dollars to that scenario would be $11.40. So a $12 minimum wage in rural Missouri and rural America is a minimum of what's appropriate. And again, I think we need to be really looking at each community, what they need, what they require. We have people that can't afford to live in homes. Homelessness is pervasive and much more prevalent than people realize.
Really is. We have people in our community living in their cars. I know we do.
Yes. And it doesn't have to be that way. We're the wealthiest country in the world, and we can do better than this. We can do better. And I'm an entrepreneur and a small business owner. I think capitalism is wonderful, but I think that in some cases it has gone too far, and in some cases we need to be really more focused on protecting the American people than ensuring that corporations can basically profiteer off the backs of Americans. And that's not what's happening in this Congress, and that's why I say there's a lot of corruption that needs to be stopped, and it's really the why of why I'm running for Congress.
How does one person like yourself? How does one person get that to change? That's hard. One person can't. It just has to start with one and go from there, doesn't it?
Exactly, and that's why I'm so hopeful about our country facing the midterm elections. There are a lot of folks that I know of around the country who are running for similar reasons to mine, people that really just want to affect change in our system, that really just want to help the people, the human beings that are living in our country. So I feel very hopeful about that. And yes, you're right. You can have one person introduce legislation and work to create a coalition to help pass that. And I think there are, most of us agree there is a problem in our government. Washington is broken. Our current representative has been part of that system now for 8 years and has certainly promoted and continued that brokenness and corruption. And we just need to change out and get a hardworking Democrat back in that seat.
That's what you're after, huh?
Yes, exactly. Look at Ike Skelton. He was a fantastic congressman and did so much for this district, brought infrastructure and dollars and jobs here, and our current congresswoman really isn't doing those things and really hasn't been. And, she's continued to help the 1% get wealthier, and our district has continued to become poorer.
I've heard the expression about talking about Ike one time, a conservative Democrat. Would you say that's what he was?
Well, that's what I understand he was, and I've never heard anything different. And I would just say though that whatever anyone's opinion about that is, I think there's a lot to be said for being fiscally conservative, but understanding that that human beings should be able to live as they choose, being socially liberal, if you will.
Yeah.
But for myself, I am certainly for fiscal responsibility. I am certainly for making sure that we do not have waste in our government and in our systems. I just think that our budget in our federal government should be much more focused on helping human beings than it is. When you really think about it, we budget for what we value, and when you have a Congress that is cutting Medicare, cutting Medicaid, cutting Social Security, working to basically circumvent the VA system. I mean, this is not a government focused on helping any human beings. It's a government that's focused on helping themselves.
Do you think in the last 10, 15, 20 years there's just become a wider chasm between the two parties? We just keep getting farther and farther apart. And
yes,
it makes it difficult to agree on anything when we just keep going the other way.
Yes. Yes, I do. I think, ideally people would set aside the idea of party altogether and really just focus on the candidate and who they believe best represents them.
Yeah.
And I think, really when I get out and talk to people one-on-one, that's what they tell me that they do in the voting booth anyway. I think that people like to think about their party as almost like a sports team. It doesn't really matter what they're doing. They're for that team, if that makes sense. You're a Raiders fan or you're a New York Mets fan or whatever it is, obviously Chiefs and the Royals. But really, I think that we're all doing ourselves a disservice perpetuating that mentality.
I don't think politics should be considered a game. It's not a game.
No.
It affects people's lives too much.
Yes, exactly.
We have a number of programs, you and I, scheduled that we'll be talking about different topics and things in the next couple of months. And I look forward to that, and I thank you, as always, for your time. Anything else, Renee, you'd like to mention today, or save some of that for the next time we have a chance to visit?
Well, I would just say thank you, Woody. I appreciate you having me. And the only other thing that I would just mention is that, again, paying attention to the fact that right-to-work legislation would completely just stop the conversation about right to work and about workers' wages, and to look into that, ask our listeners to look into that, because our current Congresswoman has co-sponsored that legislation, which would be harmful to our wages.
Okay. Thank you, Renee. Good to visit with you.
Thank you. I appreciate it.
Talk to you next time. I'm not sure when that is, but a couple of weeks, I guess.
Sounds good.
Okay. Bye-bye.
Thank you. Goodbye now.
You bet. Renee Hoganson, candidate for Congress in Missouri's 4th District, visiting with us here on Johnson County Today.